It's very important to begin to understand audiences at a more granular level. We've historically, and the market has historically traded based on age and gender, which is a really good way for us to be able to describe communities and describe people. But increasingly in today's data-driven world, there are more and more different ways and more data sets available for us to describe consumers. The challenge for us is finding a way to collect all of the right information in what has historically been a single source solution in order to be able to do that. And the reason that that's a problem is because we can try to be so much more granular, because we're looking for so much more information, you end up putting a fairly strong burden on the respondent. And when you put that burden on the respondent to ask them more questions, have them more involved, we see response rates drop, we see the quality of their responses drop off as well. And obviously as people get more and more aware of personal privacy and those sorts of things, we're seeing challenges in our ability to collect everything in one place. So what Fusion allows us to do is effectively take a number of different data sources and combine them. It gives us cost advantage because obviously we don't have to do, there's not as much duplication of effort, but it also makes a streamlined process. We're not looking to, or we don't end up with additional burden on the respondents themselves. And by doing that, it allows us to get a much more complete view of the individual. We can start to trace activity not just based on age and gender, or target not just based on age and gender, but start to target based on behaviours and outcomes and all of the other data points that come out of these various data sources and surveys that are available in the marketplace.
What work has Nielsen been doing with Fusion?
So we really launched Fusion at scale in the marketplace back in September of 2018 when we launched the Fusion between the Nielsen Consumer Panel Survey, which is a household-based sample of consumer purchase behaviour, with the PRC's PAMS database, the readership study. And that gave us that connection between purchase and media exposure, at least in the print media realm. We've just expanded that with upgraded the database in May of 2019, May of this year, including a layer of digital consumption behaviours. So we're now able to take the legacy database and combine digital activity, online usage, duration, platforms, websites, visitation, those sorts of things, video on demand and streaming television, and a whole lot of other rich sort of digital exposures to give us an even more complete view of what consumers are doing with their media exposures and when.
So it's fair to say in South Africa, Fusion is pretty advanced. It's at a nice stage at the moment.
It really is, and you know, we're excited about the opportunities of where it can go from here. We know that in relative terms at least, Fusion is still a pretty new discipline in South Africa. Obviously we've been using it fairly broadly in a number of other markets around the world, but it's new here, and so there is an exercise that, you know, we're very interested in pursuing in terms of some of the transparency around that, having discussions about really the nuts and bolts of how the Fusion works, what it's doing, advantages, disadvantages, that sort of thing. But we do see, with particularly the release now of an additional data set, an expansion of the database to drive even more granularity, we anticipate and hope that we will find more and more sources that we can combine to create this full view of the consumer.
Having used it in international markets at a further, more advanced level.
So there's a few things that we are doing in places like Italy, more focused on specifically digital content, and the Fusions there are more around not so much surveys, but panel information. So when we use digital census and we use digital panels, combining with TV panels for cross-platform media measurement of video, that's been a real push for us, and we've had a lot of success doing that in markets like Italy, Australia. Obviously, it's a big part of many of the services that we provide in the US, Germany. The Fusions are really running in various forms and instantiations all around the world.
So what can South Africa learn about Fusion from these international markets, do you think?
So I think there's two things that I would hope that the market can learn from here. First of all, that Fusion is, you know, a legitimate and an established way of being able to link these data sources together and do it in a statistically relevant, statistically accurate approach. And then secondly, really the great thing about Fusion is, you know, we've talked about it this week in terms of the construct of the one study that we've done, but Fusion can really be used in a number of different use cases. So as I mentioned, there are television applications, there are digital applications, not necessarily just in terms of the profile of individual behaviour, but the profile and the ability to link multiple observations into one space. So my hope would be that, you know, over the course of time we find more questions that we can solve using Fusion.
And that's the same across other African countries
Very
as well.
much so, very much so. And I think, again, the advantage with the Fusion is that it's a relatively light touch approach. It doesn't require a lot of investment above and beyond the studies that are already underway. So you don't need to do a whole lot of new stuff, notwithstanding that we do need to make sure that, you know, we go through the right processes in terms of the data quality and the process that is required to make sure that the Fusions are being done in such a way that truly reflects the behaviour that we're trying to measure.